Hello, greetings to everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Let us start the session.
Walaikum
So,
salam.
okay, I'm glad that many participants are over here. And let me start with the vision of Developers Student Club that we are running over here at DSC NUCES Karachi, Pakistan. So, this workshop has been arranged by the faculty coordinators of this club. So there have been many boot camps and workshops, webinars, etc. throughout the semester. This is the last one, and in next semester we will be proceeding towards international level of seminars and webinars and workshops as well. So the vision of Google Developers Student Club is to bridge the gap between industry and the academia. So basically, students are the enabler, and we ask students to basically participate in these sessions. But fortunately, we have got opportunity now. We are also asking external students and participants and industry professionals to participate in the workshops, in these kinds of workshops. So throughout the semester at DSC NUCES Karachi, we have had a lot of enthusiastic webinars and workshops that has been arranged through faculty coordinators in this semester. But those were only for the internal students, but this one is specifically open to all of the students and external students and industry professionals as well. So this semester we have been working on mobile application boot camps such as Flutter and a series of webinars and workshops, for example, search engine optimization workshop, cybersecurity workshop, etc. So we have also been delivering webinars like skills level up webinar, resume building for students, introduction to cybersecurity webinar, product development webinar, and requirements engineering, Angular workshop, Flutter bootcamp, etc., etc. Solution challenge is also over here is our uniqueness, is that we ask students to develop solutions, and we ask industry professionals to also participate and help students to build those solutions, and we submit that solution challenge as a part of Google's solution challenge, global solution challenge, and they align it with the global UN solution challenge criteria. So now we are shifting our paradigm towards international workshops. So most important thing is that attendance sheet will be floated at the end of this workshop. So kindly mark your attendance and fill up that form when I circulate that on the chat, so that you may be eligible for the e-certificate. And afterwards, after 1 week, certificate, and also you will be getting a feedback. You will be providing feedback of this workshop as well. So for the students over here, let me tell you that to motivate the students participating in this webinar, that teachers can only open the door, but you must enter it yourself. So actually we teachers and academic professionals or industry professionals can help you, but you have to actually get your hands dirty, and you have to work yourself independently, right? After getting some knowledge from the webinar, so you have to be involving in particular practical stuff as well. So the beautiful thing about learning is no one can take it away from you. So these webinars and sessions are part of continual education. So any student, any industry professional can participate it. and you can continuously improve your education skills and certification. So education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world, right? So what I always discuss is that are the enabler. Almost every innovative idea in the world comes from the students. So, for example, you think about Linux. So it was created by Linus Torvalds when he was a student. So you think about best operating system, it is Linux. You think about best media player, it is VLC media player. You think about best audio format, it is MP3, again created by a student. So anyhow, this was the introduction of student developers, Google Developers Student Club. And let me now introduce our guest and the expert, industry expert, Mr. Mohsin Risal Ahmed. He is basically a senior project manager, and he has also been involved in business analysis, process analysis, and project management since 19 plus years in the industry. So he is currently working at GoodCore Private Limited, and he has also worked with me at Shams Software Services. He was at Shams Software Services. He was also in the project management area. He was the lead of project management and PMO office over there at Shams. And afterwards, he continued his journey. So I would be really glad to ask Mr. Mohsin Risal to kindly introduce himself and start the session, please. Over to you, Mr. Mohsin.
Thank you, Sir Abdul Rahman, for a very generous introduction, and it's a real privilege to be with you all tonight. And Assalamu alaikum, hello, and good evening to all of you. As far as the introduction is concerned, as Sir Abdul Rahman has mentioned, that I've been working in the industry since about 19 plus years now, and my core expertise and areas are focused towards the field of software project management, as well as requirements engineering and business analysis. So I have worked with many firms over the course of my career, and as Sir Abdul Rahman has mentioned, that currently I've been working with GoodCore Software Private Limited in the capacity of a senior project manager. And this is pretty much it as far as my introduction is concerned. So I'll quickly get started with the agenda of this webinar, that is an introduction to project management. I'll be sharing my screen. So allow me a moment, please. All right, so as the agenda suggested, the introduction to project management. My screen is visible to you guys, right? Sir Abdul Rahman, maybe you can confirm.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Yes.
Can you please?
All right. So I see that the audience that we have in today's webinar is pretty diverse. We have people from Philippines, India, and obviously from very diverse industries, which is not limited only to the field of software development or software engineering. So I'll be trying to keep the session very generic, whereas the project management aspect is concerned, not limited to software project management, but project management in general. So let us quickly get started and see how we can progress with this session moving forward. Like all the other things, we start with a basic definition of what is a project. I have referred to PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge literature, to prepare this presentation. So you could always find these terminologies on PMI's website or Project Management Body of Knowledge textbook that can be found over the internet or can be accessed via certain libraries as well for future references. So how do we define a project? So if you read through this, that it's a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. there are actually three keywords that are integral attribute of a project. Number one, it is temporary. That is, it has a definite start date and it has a definite end date. Usually, in any professional field, projects are distinguished from regular operations. Regular operations are some regular chores that each one of us does as part of our routine professional life, that if we are coming to office, we are performing some operational aspects in the field of human resources or maybe IT support or maybe software support or in the field of healthcare or in the field of engineering or construction. So any particular endeavor that has a definite start date or a definite end date is classified as a project if it is producing a unique output. A unique output can obviously be categorized into either a product or a service or maybe a result, right? It's not limited to operations only. It has to be unique in order to fulfill the definition of a project. And obviously, a project requires a sponsor or a customer. So for example, if I have to build a building, the project relates to the field of civil engineering. And not only civil engineering, but obviously there would be tons of other engineering aspects that would be involved in constructing a building. So what is it that I need first off? I need a sponsor, or I need a customer, or I need a person, or I need a company, or maybe an agency, or maybe a government who is going to fund this construction. So whoever is funding the development of this building or the development of a software or the development of anything, any engineering plant, whoever is funding that, we usually call that a sponsor. A sponsor can be an individual person. It can be an agency, a company, or a government, or it can be anything, right? So this is how we define a project. And moving to the next step of what is project management, it is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques. Please still note the keywords: knowledge, skill, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet the project requirements. And why is there a need of project management in organizations? Because it helps the organizations or the agencies to execute the project effectively and efficiently. The next part of my presentation is going to focus on the triple constraints of a project. Whichever domain a project belongs, it is always constrained within time, scope, and cost. And encapsulated within that triangle, you could see that we have quality. So as we discussed that a project is temporary, so it has to be it has to have a definite start date, a definite end date. Same goes with the scope. It has to have a definite scope, and it has to have a definite cost. So these three parameters, they provide three very key constraints to any project. And encapsulated within these three constraints is the quality metrics of a particular project. Mathematically speaking, if you increase the time of any project, in order to keep the integrity of this triangle intact, obviously we'll have to alter any of the two other sides or maybe both of the other sides so that this shape can still be called a triangle. So altering one parameter of a project could impact the other parameters as well. If we are reducing the cost, maybe we may have to reduce the scope, we may have to reduce the timelines, and vice versa. And it all might have a very significant impact on the overall quality of the project and overall quality of whatever is being produced, whether it's a product or whether it's a service. And moving forward in this presentation, we will be focusing on at least these 3 knowledge areas of project management. Obviously, if you guys read the project management literature, and or maybe some of you might already be belonging to the field of project management, or would be doing a project management in any capacity in your organizations, or would be studying project management as a course in your schools. So you would definitely notice that there are more than these 3 knowledge areas in the field of project management. But obviously, due to the limitation of this session, as it's only an introduction to start off, we try to focus on these 3 aspects, at least in today's session. So like everything, or like every execution, project management also has a life cycle. There are 5 phases in the field of project management that you could see on my screen. First off, we initiate a project. That is, phase 1 is called the initiation. Then we enter into the phase of planning. Once the planning is done, we enter into the phase of execution. Then we have to do monitoring and controlling across the entire life cycle of the project. And then we head towards the formal completion or formal closure of the project once all the activities are completed successfully. So these are very, very integral phases in any project life cycle. So if any of you intends to pursue a career in the field of project management, these 5 phases, they have to be on your fingertips: initiation, planning, execution, monitoring, controlling, and closure. Obviously, there would be much more details into each and every phase of this project management thing, but we try to cover in the future sessions if we manage to do them. Otherwise, you could always refer to the literature textbooks to read a lot more about what particular activities are done in each phase. And obviously, we would be covering some of those in this session. So as I mentioned, I listed the 7 knowledge areas out of 10 formalized ones in the field of project management. We discussed about scope, time, and cost earlier, while we were speaking about the triple constraint of a project. So you could see the top 3 knowledge areas belong to those: project scope management, project schedule management, and project cost management. Then we have project quality management, resource management, communications management, and risk management. Apart from these 7, we also have stakeholders management and integration management. So let us try to touch base with each and every single area. How to define a project's scope? In a nutshell, or if we try to define it in one sentence, we would say that what is to be done, or the activities that are to be done to accomplish the objectives of a particular project. So let us quickly read through this, what we have on the screen. Project scope management includes the processes required to ensure that the project includes all the work required and only the work required to complete the project successfully. Please focus once again on this content that I have marked in red font: only the work required. Because the scope, whenever you start to define the activities which are to be done in a particular project, whichever project it is, it has very, very huge tendency, to grow beyond what was initially planned. For example, if we discussed about constructing a building earlier in this session, and I said that, okay, we would be constructing a building that has 10 floors, but once you enter into the execution of the project, the sponsor could come up and say, hey, just build me 2 additional floors to this building, or maybe I need a basement as well in this building, So, and adding anything or altering anything in the originally agreed upon scope is definitely going to impact what? If you're changing the scope, let us recap the triple constraint of a project. if you are altering the scope, then there is an impact on the project's cost and project's time, and ultimately on the project's quality as well. So scope management is all about identifying the activities which are to be done, and more importantly, the activities which are not to be done. So in a single sentence, I usually say it like this, that, okay, scope is what is to be done, and more importantly, what is not to be done. So acting as a project manager, it is a very, very challenging responsibility to guard the scope of a project, because you could be facing pressures from the internal management, you could be facing pressure from the sponsor, you could be facing pressures from the third party, to include their wishes into a particular project. And that is all going to increase the scope of your project, and ultimately increasing the cost and the timeline, and making an impact on the quality. So this is how you define the scope of a project, and how we guard the scope of project. In the next slide, I have listed some key expertise that are required for a person who does the scope management. Usually the person is called a business analysis, particularly in the field of software project management. The role can vary if we are talking about some other engineering aspects, but more or less the activities are the same. That one has to study the requirements, one has to gather the requirements from the stakeholders, one has to have excellent interpersonal skills, excellent communication skills, and all the bullet points that you see on my screen. Requirements documentation, diagramming, wireframing, facilitation, conflict management. For the attendees who probably attended the previous session that we conducted on the topic of requirements engineering, this is the role of a business analyst, who documents or define the scope of a particular project, and it has to be defined without any ambiguity, number one, and number two, without any open-ended features or functionalities, or without any dual meaning aspects. For example, if I'm writing a particular requirement, it should mean exactly the way it is meant to be written, rather than it is open to multiple assumptions for multiple people, So it is very important phase of the project, and usually it is the role of a business analyst to own this particular phase, right? The next phase or the next constraint that we saw in our triangle earlier was time. And when we speak about time, let's quickly go a step back, where we mentioned that a project has to have a definite start date and definite end date. So when we talk about start dates and end dates, we have to compile a schedule. For example, earlier we managed to define the scope. Okay, what is to be done? We managed to write down all the activities. We managed to prepare a list of all the activities. Now we have to prepare the schedule, that, okay, which activity is going to take how many number of days, number of weeks, number of months, or whichever parameter or whichever unit of time. So the schedule has to be compiled for any project, and it has to relate with the requirements, obviously, and it has to conform to the requirements and the baseline or the constraints that were initially identified while defining the project's objective. So once again, let's quickly read through this content that we have on the slide. Project schedule management includes the processes required to manage the timely completion of the project. Project scheduling provides a detailed plan that represents how and when the project will deliver the products, services, and results defined in the project scope, and serves as a tool for communication, managing stakeholders' expectation, and as a basis for performance reporting. So we spoke about the project's scope definition and scope management, and now we are talking about project schedule management. So we have all the activities listed in whatever tool we are using, for documentation. It can be a spreadsheet, it can be a Google spreadsheet at Google Docs. It can be a Microsoft Excel file on your desktops. It can be Microsoft Project that is particularly used for project planning and scheduling. It could be some other tools like Primavera, Smartsheet, and there are various other ones. So it has to do is that one should be able to list all the activities and then define the schedule of each activity so that they converge and in totality they represent the overall delivery schedule of a particular project. Once again, it is said that if you are failing to plan, you are planning to fail. If you are not planning, if a project manager is not planning for his project, he or she is heading for a disaster, because without a plan or without a roadmap, it will become very tough for the project manager to keep a track of the activities first off, and to keep a track of the schedule, or to identify the activities which are behind the schedule, which are slipping, which needs remedial actions, which needs additional resources allocations, and all those kind of things. So unless we have a plan in front of us, we cannot do any of those activities. We could still do some of them, but once again, we'd be like kind of shooting the moon, without any concrete baseline or any concrete basis. So on this screen, you see I have titled this slide as a 5-step planning process. Number 1, we are defining the activities, which we did in project scope management and in project scope definition. Number 2, we have to sequence the activities. For example, I listed down about 20 activities or 20 tasks that are to be done in the project that I am doing for constructing a building. So some of the activities, they can be done in parallel. Some of the activities, they have to be done in a sequence, because some of them would be having dependencies. And once we speak about dependencies, usually we have about 3 or 4 types of dependencies. So let me quickly elaborate them. One is a mandatory dependency. That, for example, in order to have the second floor constructed, we need to have ground floor and first floor ready. We cannot go directly constructing the second floor in the thin air. So constructing a second floor, for constructing the second floor, we got to have ground plus 1 ready. So the readiness of ground floor and the first floor is a mandatory precursor or a mandatory prerequisite or a mandatory dependency for the activity that we have named to construct the second floor, right? So this is how we sequencing our activities. We sequence our activities and we define the dependencies on each one of them. That, okay, for activity B, we need to have activity A completed. For activity of C to be started, we need to have activity A and B, both of them completed. These kind of things. So this is the step number 2, where we define the sequence and the dependencies. Step number 3, for each project, obviously we need to have resources to accomplish a particular task. Once again, keeping the same example, we'll be needing labor, we'll be needing human resources, we'll be needing material resources as well. Usually we classify resources into 2 major heads. One is a human resource. The second one is a material resource. For example, we'd be needing the construction material, machinery, cements, building blocks, and all these kind of things. Secondly, we'd be needing labor, who would be human resources, So we have to allocate resources for whatever tasks I'm planning to do or whatever activities I'm planning to do. I'll then assign each activity or each task against a particular resource. And then in the step number 4, I'll be doing the estimation or a projected completion or a projected duration for that particular activity. And as a last step, we'd be defining the start date and end date against each and every activity. One of the things that I want to highlight is that you'd notice that the point number 4, it is mentioned below point number 3 that first we allocate the resources and then we do the estimation. Either it's an effort estimate or a duration estimate. So at times, there are activities or there are tasks which we call effort driven. It's a particular jargon in the industry of project management that it requires a human effort to complete a particular activity. And once again, when we say it requires a human effort, it can vary based on person to person. For example, if I can complete a particular activity in say 5 days, Sir Abdul Rahman can complete the same activities in 3 days, based on his experience, based on his skill set, or based on his natural stature, So these things vary person to person. So we have to keep this as well into the consideration when we are working with human resources and when we are doing this estimation that is related particularly to the effort estimates thing. And once again, to reiterate, we develop this schedule as a last step. Actually, this is one of the very interesting aspects, if you would notice, or if any of you is already working as a project manager, or if any of you is working in any particular field, in any area, regardless of project management, we could apply the same principle or the same 5-step process into our whatever activity that we are trying to do, or whichever we are planning to do. But in reality, what happens, for example, if my supervisor or my manager assigns me a task or assigns me a project, or if there is a client who is sponsoring a project, or if there is another sponsor who is funding a particular project, the very first thing that they ask or they tell before awarding the project is the deadline, is a due date. For example, they would say that, okay, I want this project to be completed in 3 months, or I want this project to be completed in 1 year. And what do we do then? Because we have not done the scope management, we have not done the scope definition, we have not done the activity definition, we haven't been doing the resources allocation, we haven't been doing the effort estimation, but we have a deadline. So this is a pretty funny situation, or it's an irony, I must say, that actually we do a reverse engineering, that we develop the schedule first off, practically speaking, and then we go about defining the activities and do the sequencing, do the resources allocation, and then once again estimations and all the other things. So this is one of the reasons that if any of you go about studying the statistics of successive project, I'm not sure what the number is, but in one of the other sessions when I was doing a similar presentation and I was like doing some R&D, I figured out probably about, there was one stats which was mentioning that about 70 to 74% projects, they are delayed. They complete behind their originally planned schedule. There are definitely various other reasons for the delay that a project manager or a company or a firm encounters during the project's execution. But lack of planning or lack of activity definition or lack of scope management is definitely the biggest factor that a project ends up missing its projected deadline. So these 5 steps, once again, we spoke about the 5 phases of the project management life cycle earlier, and I recommended to have those on your fingertips. So whenever you enter into the planning phase of a project, these 5 steps, they have to be on your fingertips, and make sure that we are documenting our activities one way or the other. You could use the tool that you are comfortable with. I would not be recommending or suggesting any tool at this point of time, but have the things documented at least. Having the things simply in our minds, it's very risky. All right, so moving ahead, here is a very high level example that I extracted once again from PMBOK, the course book of project management body of knowledge. It's like showing the activity list in various formats. You could have it as a simple list like this with the start dates and end dates over here. You could have the list along with the bar chart or bar diagram over here, or you could call this a Gantt chart as well, this particular area that you are seeing. Or you could have the activities listed in the format of a network diagram, and a network diagram shows the activities as per their dependencies that we discussed earlier, that activity B has to start after activity A, or activity C cannot be started unless activity B or activity A are completed. So those kind of dependencies, those are best depicted in this particular format, which we call network diagram. One of the other scheduled presentation is a simple Gantt chart, and with sincere apologies to any of the members who do not belong to the field of software industry, because this actually depicts a typical software development project, in a waterfall model. But it's going to be very understandable for the other people as well, I'm pretty sure. So let's quickly skim through it. That we are doing a project initiation kickoff. We are doing the functional specifications over here. That is, we are defining the scope. We are doing the designs. We are then moving on to write the application architecture and database designs. Along with the same activity, we are doing a preparation for our testing and quality assurance activities. Then we are entering into the development phase, and the development phase is then broken down into front end, back end, or whatever kind of development that we might have based on the project need. Then the code reviews are happening in parallel as well. Then there is an alpha launch. Then there is a phase of testing quality assurance. Then there is a beta launch. Then there is a phase of user acceptance testing. Then we are providing training to the end users documentation, and then we are going live. And lastly, we are doing the project's closure over here. So this is a pretty linear or a waterfall model, modern project management obviously has a lot of variations and flexibilities. We now have agile models, and within agile we have Scrum, Kanban, feature-driven development, test-driven development. There are various models, that one can use based on the project's need. But the building blocks or the basic principles, they are still the same. That we have been going through in this session. The third aspect that we saw about the triple constraint was project's cost. Everything has a cost. We all know that. Nothing comes for free. So when we are doing a project, we have a cost, we have a budget that we have to make sure that our activities or project is conforming to that. For example, if a project was budgeted at, say, $10,000, and we end up spending $15,000, who is going to pay those additional $5,000? Nobody, unless there are valid justifications or valid reasoning, right? So as a project manager, one really has to make sure that the costing mechanism or the cost control is strictly in place, and it is all related with time, that we can say scheduling, or the scope. If you increase the scope of a project, then there could be a possibility that the project's cost can be increased. If you increase the timeline of the project for whatever reasons, there is a possibility that the project might incur additional costs, just because you have to pay your team members or additional, or you have to procure the material resources at a higher cost, maybe if you're doing that after a certain point of time, So it's very, very important to keep a watch on the project's cost that your project has incurred up till now. What is it that you have spent so far? What is it that is remaining? And how you are foreseeing or how you are projecting that to be consumed till the project's completion. I'll roll back to the second or third slide where we had this triple constraint. I hope that this triple constraint triangle is now going to make a lot more sense to all of you guys after we have gone through these discussions which are related to scope management, time management, and cost management. And ultimately, I would reiterate that impacting any of those parameters might impact the quality of the project. The project might not, the activities or the product or the services, they might not be produced with the same quality as those were envisioned earlier at the time of a project's initiation. So once again, that's a pretty high risk. The last aspect that we'll be trying to cover is once again the project's quality management. Usually in every engineering field or every services industry's field, there is now a quality assurance department in place. For example, if I call a call center seeking maybe an advice related to my bank account, the IVR, it wants me that for quality assurance purposes, my call would be recorded, right? So they have a quality assurance department who are judging or who are evaluating their call center agents on how they are treating their customers. So in every field, in the field of software engineering, we have the Department of Software Quality Assurance. In the field of civil engineering, we have in the field of mechanical engineering, in the field of electrical engineering, we have quality assurance departments. And obviously, there are some global standards related to quality assurance that are being taken care of by, which we usually call ISO standards, and for each and every particular industry, ISO international standards organizations, that is, they have their separate benchmark, but once again, if we go into the detail of quality management, it's going to be a separate topic in itself. So we'll be limiting the quality control thing to project management. Once again, whatever is being developed, whatever is being built, whatever is being done, it has to go through quality checks. Once again, the basis or the baseline for quality checks is going to be the activity list that we are compiling in the phase of project scope management. The quality assurance engineers or the testers, they must be aware of what they have to test. Unless they know what is coming their way, they won't be able to do that. So once again, in the project's initiation or in the phase of project planning, when a project team is being assembled or when a project team is being composed or being formulated, one really has to make sure that the project is appropriately staffed. We have skilled people in our team for project's execution. If there is any loopholes, if there is any loophole, any glitch or anything in the scope management phase or in the planning phase or in the execution phase, it's going to impact the ultimate quality. So this is pretty much it from my end. I'll leave the forum open to you guys for any questions that you may have, and I'll be obliged to respond to those. So over to you, Sir Abdurrahman. Maybe you could facilitate the questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Mohsin Risal, for giving us such a wonderful session on project management. So usually, obviously, this session is an introductory session, and I would request you to start a series of sessions for the project management in particular. so that we have seen that the interest of the people over here in Pakistan and also in other countries as well is pretty much high regarding project management. Everybody wants to learn about it. So this was actually the first step, and many people are asking about the study material. So we will be providing. I'll be emailing them all of the study materials, PPT, profile of the trainer, and everything, so that if you later on would like to contact Mr. Mohsin Risal, you can also contact him as well. And the important thing is that in order to get your electronic participation certificate, you need to sign the attendance sheet, which I have already floated on the Google chat box over here, Google Meet chat. So let me also again float that attendance sheet. You will be getting the certificate approximately after 1 week from now. So let me send the URL again, right? And there are some questions. For example, wait on. Can a person, Alina Nadeem is asking, can a person in digital marketing transition project management?